welcome. I'm sitting with Martin, part owner of Border X Brewery. He's been running the brewery for 3.5 years. They're opening up their second location in LA. It's a family-owned business, and I'm excited to have him. So thank you for sitting down and chatting with us today.
Of course, thank you for coming over and checking out our place and wanting to hear our story.
Cool. So it's a family-owned business. Definitely want to understand where your family's from.
Sure.
How do you guys, came up with the concept of the brewery, and then how you got the kickstart to start it and everything. So
of course. So the business started, to begin with, my family was originally from Mexico. I mean, my grandparents migrated over about 50, 60 years ago, so they had that experience of crossing over to the US. My dad was raised a little bit in Mexico, my uncle mostly here in the US. So we do have, or they started with a cross-culture, the cross-border experience. Myself and my brother both grew up in Tijuana in Mexico for like at least for myself, the first 15 years of my life, and then come over here to high school. So again, that cross-border culture was very present within us. My brother and myself, because we did go to university here, we got to experience a little bit of the craft beer boom that started happening around, it's happened way before we discovered it or started getting into it. But we started homebrewing, we started tinkering with different recipes, different approaches, better equipment, and started growing. Then we decided to take it over to our family reunions just because, we were making so much homebrew at this point, let's share with the family. Once we shared it with my dad and my uncle, they loved it. All of our uncles loved it. My grandma loved it, and my grandma doesn't like beer, so it was a great thing to see.
Yeah.
And then from there, our family was always wanting to be a little bit more entrepreneurial. They always wanted to create their own business. They wanted to work together as a family and create something to grow and to communicate better, just to enjoy family life with the business itself. So we thought about making beer and introducing it to like Mexican community, Latino community, the cross-border community, because a lot of our friends that grew up in Mexico and stayed in Mexico, obviously because that's where their life was, they never knew about craft beer. The only thing they knew were the lagers and the light beers, the Dos Equis, Tecates, Pacificos, all those beers. And whenever we brought IPAs or any heavy beers, they wouldn't drink them. So that's when our concept, myself and my brother first started making beers that even our friends would drink in Mexico, or even people here in the US that were also from Mexican background that were never exposed to the craft beer culture, just to kind of educate them a little bit more. So that's when we all decided to kind of take this approach of being evangelists of craft beer and kind of putting the craft beer to be an approachable thing for Mexicans, Latinos, for everyone that is not used to the super hoppy beers, the super dark stouts. So we started creating beers with a little bit more of the Mexican palate with like a hibiscus agave, our chocolate bolita, our horchata. Just those names made it very approachable for a lot of people that are never used to craft beer to be able to try these different things. So that was our concept for our business. It's about educating, promoting the culture, and connecting two worlds that normally didn't have a pathway to connect.
Yeah, and so you talk about coming up with the differentiating factor, right? It's
Yeah.
just the culture, about community and all that. What did that look like? Did you all, like, when you were brewing the beer, you're like, I'm gonna get to, that's gonna be our differentiating factor, or did you kind of stumble upon it, or did you talk to your family about it? What was that conversation like?
So it was a little bit of both. It was kind of like stumbling into it, but I had already dabbled into the whole concept before when I was brewing at home. So I remember the first batch that I made that I wanted to make Mexican was a hibiscus or Jamaica heavy, just like I think I was trying to create an IPA. The first thing I realized was that the IPA didn't mesh well with the hibiscus, and the hibiscus made it way too bitter and in a very unpalatable way. So I already had the concept of making that beer, and I kind of gave up on it until we started brewing professionally. That's when we started seeing, even though we were creating traditional, like your traditional light IPAs, we were creating some ambers, we were creating some porters, some lighter beers, but it wasn't until I brought back the hibiscus agave saison, which is now our blood saison, that it started taking off and people started connecting a lot more.
Yeah.
So we did try that approach to see if it would work, and then we saw the immediate connection with a lot of people. And even the chocolate bolita, there's a story that once we created it, we saw a group of moms come in with like strollers, and they would never drink beer, but they said, I wanted to try a beer that had chocolate bolita in it, and so it made us realize that the approach we were trying to take and communicate was really working.
Yeah.
So it was with intention of being different, like embracing our culture, embracing our flavors, embracing our palate, and communicating that through traditional brewing practices that we learned from imitating or developing our own different recipes.
Yeah, and talk about the importance of testing. So a lot of entrepreneurs, they just are gung-ho and they really just want to go out and start things, right? They just go and don't do enough testing at the beginning. How important was it for you to do that testing to set you up for success in future years?
I think one of the things I learned is that you can have a business plan, you can have a vision, and you can have a product that you swear is going to be able to succeed, and it's going to be the killer product that it's going to make your company grow. When we first started, we thought, like every other brewery did, it's like, oh, well, a light IPA to introduce drinkers to IPAs is going to work. Mellow stout or like a porter that's not too hoppy, but it's very flavorful, kind of like an amber that Mexicans are used to. So we were going with a very traditional mindset, and it wasn't until that testing phase where a lot of people weren't getting impressed. We weren't attracting the right customers. What we thought was going to be like a bridgeway gap between craft beer and Mexicans with just traditional craft brews didn't work. So when we kind of shifted gears a little bit and tried the approach of putting traditional ingredients, that testing and those reactions and just seeing people's faces, people's comments, people's like what they wanted to taste next, like that started giving us ideas, and just testing a little bit more and more kind of honed what we needed to do.
Yeah.
Because if we would have gone with just our original concept to just make good beer and because we're Mexican it's going to matter, like that didn't really resonate with a lot of people or attract the right customers that we wanted.
Yeah, no, that's good. And how did you facilitate that feedback that you got? So you obviously you tried a beer and some people came back and said, hey, you know, this doesn't taste this tastes okay. How did you take that feedback and then put actions to that feedback?
Oh, for sure. The biggest thing was being on the front lines. So obviously, as a small business owner, we didn't have the capital. Well, one of the things is the owners ourselves kind of put the very small amount of capital together to even just start the concept itself. So we didn't have operating capital. We didn't have the luxury of hiring employees. We were in a warehouse facility. So it was the owners that were always there bartending, serving the beers to the customers. And it's mostly just asking word of mouth, like seeing people's reactions. People's first reaction to drinking a beer immediately tells you more than what they're going to say.
Yeah.
So if a person's eyes kind of like grow and light up, you know that they like something. If somebody just kind of goes with the Fuchi face, like you know they're not going to like it.
Yeah.
Even though they say, oh, this is amazing afterwards, you know they're just being nice. But having that feedback of people saying either this is good, this is bad, most people are very nice, so then most people said they liked it. But we did give some critiques. We did have some constructive criticism from some people saying this is either too light, too bitter, this has oxygen in it, like which oxygen with beer sometimes gives a little bit of off flavors.
Yeah.
So because we knew we were an experts without taking a high horse position, we took that feedback to heart. If somebody said they didn't like the beer and just walked out, I mean, we don't know what we can change. When you give criticism, it's always good to be a little bit more constructive more than anything.
Yeah, so you ask those questions, you keep asking questions.
Correct. It's like, why didn't you like it?
Yeah.
Do you normally not like IPAs? Do you normally not like sours? Do you normally not like Jamaica? Is that why you don't like it? Or is there a different aspect? Maybe there's too much Jamaica, maybe it's too sweet, maybe it's too bitter. So asking a little bit of those qualifying questions help us kind of define what we needed to change in the brewing process.
Got it.
The great thing about brewing is that once you create a recipe, you can tweak things here and there, batch to batch, until you get to the right point.
Yeah.
And that feedback is always greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
And I think it's in any business. If you get customer feedback, don't take it as an offense, take it as a growing opportunity.
Yeah. So when you had the idea, you wanted to, create this differentiated product. So you didn't have a big location at first, right?
No, it was tiny.
So how did you brew your first batches of beer? And talk about those resources that you found that helped you eventually get you to a full-blown brewery.
Sure. So we started with the first money we invested as owners was to buy a 100-gallon system. So it was a pretty decent sized system. But when we first started, it was our home brew system making 10 gallons at a time. So just for reference, 10 gallons, when you see those kegs that you buy for parties that you have the party pump on, those are 15 gallons.
Okay.
So we were making beer in a hollowed out shell of those 15-gallon kegs, but we were making 10 gallons at a time. So very small production. We all had corporate jobs, so we would brew from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. or to 3 a.m. So it was long days that we had to brew.
Yeah.
Sometimes we had to double batch just to have enough beer for the next weekend or for the weekend after. So it was very complicated at first. It was those connections in San Diego that were very helpful. Brewers are always willing to help you out if you need equipment, if you need knowledge, if you need any advice. I think just reaching out, accepting you're not the expert in things, because we weren't, but some people with that clouded mentality probably wouldn't reach out to get help or any of that. So once that happened, we started doing festivals. We started doing, like for example, here in Barrio Logan, we weren't here, but because we came for our art gallery opening and we served our beer, people started liking our beer and told us to open up in a corner spot as like a testing ground. So it was very good. I mean, just talking to people, accepting feedback, asking for help, like all these things, all these resources just helped out a lot. Even the big brewers that we were intimidated by, sometimes would be the nicest people that would offer everything they had to kind of help you grow and to just, because everyone's collectively working together to bring the craft up, so everyone's always willing to collaborate.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think a lot of people, like you said, they might not know something, so they like give up, right? And then they just don't try to go find those resources. So that's awesome that you guys did. And can you talk about then the next steps from taking a small operations? I know you were hustling, right? You were working late nights and doing all that, and then eventually you're like, okay, I can finally quit my full-time job. What was that like? What was that process like? When did you know you were able to quit your full-time job? And then how did you get this location from that?
So as I mentioned before, one of the opportunities that we had when we got invited to Logan to serve in an art gallery was kind of be open to opportunities. This neighborhood 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, it still had a bad reputation to it. I mean, it was always a very arts cultural center, but it still kind of had that negative stigma of being a neighborhood you wouldn't want to be around at night or even in the afternoon. But luckily, there were a lot of small businesses that were working hard to change that image. And those businesses were the ones that brought us in to kind of help them out. The tacos in the corner, the art gallery that brought us in. So we said yes to this opportunity, took a risk. So I think you have to take calculated risks. The risk we took here was a very small investment to try and expand their footprint and to get into a different neighborhood that was more centralized. So it was a small calculated risk with minimal loss at first. So we took that spot, and then another investor came in, the fifth investor that we now have. Loved our concept, loved our ideas, loved our beers. So he was willing to, we were lucky enough that he was willing to put in some capital to buy into the company to be able to expand into this big operation. Yeah. Once we saw this big operation go in, we still kept brewing, buying more equipment to supply the demand that we had here. We were lucky enough to have more demand than supply at first, so sometimes we had to turn people away with certain beers that we didn't have. But I think it's just a small process of taking small risks with small advancements. We didn't take the big route of going out for a big investor to begin with. A lot of things kind of came to us, but we could have said no to a lot of these opportunities. I think it's understanding all the opportunities that are out there and kind of going with those. The one trigger that made me realize I needed to quit my full-time job to make this work was, first of all, I had a great opportunity myself because I was able to save some money with the corporate job that I have to understand that I had a year or two, if I really wanted to kind of survive with very minimal pay or with a huge pay cut. Yeah. But I knew if I didn't do that, the business wasn't going to grow to a level that we wanted to in 5-10 years. So it's kind of that risk or reward kind of balance that you have to take. I could have kept working on my corporate job and what people say half-assing doing both, and you're not paying full attention to any of them, so you're going to suffer in your corporate job with your bosses, and you're going to suffer with the business because it's not going to grow as fast as it could. I mean, it's a hard decision. It's not a simple thing. Even for myself, I don't know if I did the right thing, but now that I think about it, I know I did. Yeah. Or else the business wouldn't have been gone to this level. We've been growing, almost doubling year after year. We implement better practices. We're here every day checking what's going on in the mornings, in the afternoon, problem solving. And then being able to grow to this new location wouldn't have happened if myself, my brother, and now my uncle just recently actually quit his job. Oh, wow. So it's stages. You don't want to, off the bat, quit a job. I mean, some people do. Yeah. I praise them because some people just quit their jobs with no backup, no parachute, and go either sink or swim, which is a great approach. It motivates you. It lights a fire behind you. So it really creates that, but have a plan behind it too. Right. If you just quit a job and say, I'll figure it out, that might be a hard approach. For me, I quit my job knowing I don't want to say having a plan B, because you never want to have a plan B if your plan A fails, because if you're hoping that plan A could potentially fail, you're not going to put yourself as much as you should. So I said, all right, worst case scenario, I'm not going to live on the streets. Yeah. Worst case scenario, but you always got to think about those, but obviously you also got to think about being very optimistic. Yeah. So you had essentially two paths, right? You were doing your job, building a career that you know is always going to be there, no matter if you fail, and then you were also just hustling and trying to build your side hustle, and then eventually you have your side hustle overtake your career,
but you always have your career, right? That's what you're getting at
in a sense, yeah.
right.
I could always, I left things, like I didn't say to my boss, F you, I'm just gonna leave this
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
I got my own thing, I'm gonna succeed, I know I'm gonna be the best, I'm gonna buy your company. Like, you don't leave your other job and burn bridges
Right.
like that. I left in very good terms. I gave him like a 3-month that I'm gonna leave kind
Yeah.
of term. So after that, I was just saying like, oh, well, I can always go back to that. That was kind of like my fallback.
Right.
But even then, like you said, it kind of was kind of a balance. But once the dedication of this took over, I needed to dedicate full time and full attention to it.
Yeah, I know. I always hear of, like you always hear like Steve Jobs just like lived in his parents' garage. You know, like Bill Gates like quit or dropped out of high school or college, and a lot of people feel like that's the only route, right? That's like highlighted in today's world, in the startup world, technology world. But I think there is like a balance that you need to strike, where some people don't have the privilege to live in in a garage or drop out of college, or because there's certain external things happening that people might not know. So that's interesting to hear your side of like, okay, you had that mindset, you were smart enough to say, okay, these two things are equally important at this point, but now your side hustle is growing and you need to do that full time. So that's good to hear. Would you say that? Would you give it, like, what type of advice would you give somebody who is in that position? Would you say, like, just stick to your side hustle, have it a side hustle until you can finally, like, until it's growing? Or would you say just, like, grow your career a little bit and then finally go off? Or, like, what type of advice would you give somebody in a similar position?
I mean, I think it depends on an individual basis. There are some people that have a genius idea, and they can, if they run with it, they can immediately grow and expand and explode and create an amazing business.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more conservative when it comes to taking these risks because I have a finance and kind of like a more business money background.
Right.
So for me, like you mentioned, there's always a level that I put for this business. I'm like, I can't, because it wasn't just myself, it was a lot of different investors. Me quitting my job and being a burden on the company would probably be more detrimental than it would be beneficial. So understanding that benefit cost analysis is like, well, I can quit my job, I can pay myself X amount, but is there someone that I can pay that can do it full time and I can dedicate more time and make it grow faster while I still grow on this area until the company's ready to take me on? It really depends. There's people, I know a couple of people that have quit their jobs with just hopes and dreams, not really a business plan. They just quit their jobs and say, I'm just gonna do this. And they've been successful. I have a friend that moved to another state, said, I'm quitting the job I have here now, I'm gonna open up my own catering company. And he did. He opened up his alcohol catering company. Now he's making millions over there, and it's huge.
Yeah.
But he took that risk of saying, like, I'm just gonna move to another state. I know there's a niche for this. He bartended for the first year to make ends meet, and then his company kind of grew from there. But I would say just kind of understand where your position is. Think about what risks you're willing to take. If you think your idea is genius, make sure you, again, coming from a finance background, make sure you have something to sell. Make sure you have a revenue stream in mind. Don't just quit your job with an idea that you're just going to make paintings and the paintings are magically going to sell.
Right.
If you don't know who you're going to sell them to, if you don't know, you don't have to know exactly who your customer is going to be, but maybe just understand a little bit of where you're planning to go with this.
Yeah.
Even if it's not super concrete, have some sort of plan before you decide to quit your initial hustle.
Right.
For me, my decision to make a corporate job first, I had it since I was a kid for whatever reason. I guess my mind was always plugged in to be a finance manager or a business guy. But I always knew I wanted to work in a corporate job to understand how businesses worked from the inside, even these big corporations.
Yeah.
Take the best approaches and take what I think could have been improved based on that 5-year experience. And then I think all that experience helped me out into building my own business as well. So I think that's the balance between those two is how wide I recommend, but I know not everyone has that luxury to be able to do both.
Yeah. It's just interesting to hear now, because right now you're closing your first, you have an investor, but now you're doing some crowdfunding and you're opening up your second location. So it's interesting to hear your perspective from that. So like looking at your success now, is there any point where where you struggled through the process that you look back and you're like, dang, I could have done that better to set you up for more success?
Yeah.
Or like what are the struggles you look back and you say, wow, like I could have done this better, or wow, I shouldn't have done that? What are those things?
I mean, looking back, obviously, hind vision is always 20/20, and that's what most people say. But I do, like, looking back, probably one of the biggest things I would do, I would say, is probably quit my job earlier than what I did. I think I think I played it too safe, and I quit my job a little bit too early, because I feel like this ramp up that we're experiencing now could have happened a year before if I would have dedicated my time 100%. So I would say that because it was, I think, around year 2 or 3 where we invested in this big location, but we didn't have anyone working here full time to drive the traffic, to drive the marketing, to drive the great beers, to drive the experience, the events that we currently have now. But the first year or 2, we actually struggled a little bit to get to the level that we needed to be financially stable.
Right.
I mean, that's one of our biggest regrets, is that because all the owners had corporate jobs, nobody was here to look after the place. It wasn't until my brother quit his job that everything kind of started stabilizing, improving, expenses being controlled, revenue increasing. Then I quit my job, and that even exploded even more.
Yeah.
So I think that's my biggest regret, is probably being a little bit more risky when it came to that. Like I said, obviously it was a balance that I chose to do, but I think that's one of my regrets, is I think I should have jumped a little bit more and dedicated more time to this place to make it grow faster than it could have been, than it has right now.
Yeah.
I don't regret what we did. I think what we did, even if it was slower growth, it kind of helped us define who we are. The experiences we're showing now, the struggles we went through made us realize that we have potential that's not just beer, it's more the experience, it's the culture, it's the fundraisers, it's food. So we built up a lot of things because of this slow time, that maybe if I would have dedicated a lot of time myself personally, we would have gone a different direction.
Yeah.
But and if I were to do anything differently, it'd probably be to maybe quit that job a little bit earlier, just to make the business grow faster.
Yeah. And that's awesome to hear that. I mean, it looks like you do a lot of reflecting, right? So you reflect back and you try to get better. What is it? So you talk about the events that you put on. What does it mean to you to be able to like be in the community and be put on these events that people just come and enjoy, and it's really the culture that you talked about early on that differentiated you from other breweries. What does it mean to you to be able to do that now and put those events?
That's amazing. I mean, when we first started, it was mostly just bring beers. Obviously, the differentiating factor was the beers with the Mexican flavor. But once we understood that when we create events that brings the people, like creating the cultural events that go along with the cultural flavors in our beer, really enhanced our brand and enhanced the experience. It feels amazing. I mean, when we create events, for example, fundraisers, we create fundraisers for local nonprofits, for the community. We started with putting up artwork from all the community around here. We didn't charge them to put it up. We didn't charge them to sell it. So they could sell, they can put it up. It was kind of like a mutually beneficial arrangement for them. They could put the artwork, people that came in here were able to see it. It beautified our space, they made money out of it, so it was like a win-win for both of us.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted to create events, offer services, and offer an atmosphere that everyone feels like they're collaborating, they're working together. That's just a great, I love it. If it was just beer, I feel I probably still like it, but now that it's more culture, more events, more community, it just kind of makes you, it's great walking around and having all these people love your brand, not just because of the products you offer, but the experiences you offer and what you help with. Like it's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now looking at your future growth and looking at the second location, what are you most excited for? Are you scared of anything coming with the bigger size? What's in your head right now as you go through that?
I think the biggest thing is excitement. We knew this location, we pack it to the brim Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays. We always have a lot of people, so we get people that came from LA, we get people that were from Northern California, we have people from Arizona, from Mexico, so we have people from everywhere. So I'm really excited to be able to expand to a second tasting room.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I feel a lot of excitement is we don't really distribute a lot because we don't produce enough beer. We sell a lot, luckily we sell a lot through our tasting room. So this extra foothold allows a bigger market to experience that culture, that community, especially in this community of Bell, doesn't have a lot of breweries, doesn't really have a lot of places to drink beer to congregate.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of feedback. We already have served beer up there, so we're getting a lot of the feedback from them.
Nice.
They're all excited to have us there, so that excitement makes us excited.
Nice.
On the flip side, obviously, as I mentioned before, I'm more of the finance, business planning kind of mindset.
Yeah.
It makes me really nervous undertaking loans, undertaking a bigger warehouse, undertaking bigger fixed expenses. Like all these things are always in the back of my mind.
Right.
But we got a plan of how we're going to pay that. We have a plan of how we're going to bring people in, how we're going to sell our product, how much revenue we need to make, what our break-even point is. So we're understanding all these things. We built in a little cushion of revenue. So obviously that little concern of what if we fail makes you plan for contingencies and makes you strive to grow faster and to provide a great experience and people can start going over there.
When did you know you were ready to expand? Like at what point did you say, okay, we conquered this one location and then we're ready for the next? What was that?
I think last year, I mean, we weren't quite ready just because all of the owners, even though we have some business background, none of us knew how to fundraise. So it was a big struggle, a big hurdle none of us were ready to undertake. Another big thing, and actually something I recommend to everyone that starts a business, is always start your books as organized as you can from early on as you can. That was our biggest difficulty for us, is that our books, even though I was the guy keeping the books on track, they weren't CPA certified, they weren't audited, they weren't anything like that. So in order for us to be able to find funding outside, it took a while to modify a lot of my little things.
Yeah.
But if you try and do it by paper, by ledgers, it's doable by yourself, but I would really recommend hiring someone to help you out with those.
Yeah.
Because the decision maker or the decision point was with us, once we fixed our books, we realized we got opportunity to offer either equity, to get a loan, to do all these things. So now that we saw I think that was the switching point. Once our books were in line to be able to ask for funds or to be able to grow, that's when we decided we need to expand. I mean, first of all, that's kind of our business plan. We want to expand through tasting rooms, but that was a triggering factor, knowing that we're financially stable. This operation is not like it's making profit now, so we don't have to depend on something else to make this profitable. We want to have a profitable entity, a profitable business before we decided to expand the experience. Why take on more debt when you're already in debt? So that was, once we had our books in line, once this place was profitable, we knew it was time to start expanding. We got an opportunity. Again, it's all about opportunity, talking with people. People are always going to offer you different things. This one clicked very well. It was a partnership between the developers and us. It's in a neighborhood that really needed it. The community, the mayor, the city council, all of them wanted us to be there. So I think that's what motivated us and triggered us to go over there.
Cool.
But yeah, that for sure is the stability of the business and it's understanding that we could grow this a little bit more, but no matter how much effort we put into this location, it was only going to grow X amount.
Right.
Expand into a separate tasting room with a separate infrastructure with a different neighborhood, we knew that the same amount of effort could be placed into this new place and it could grow or triple.
Cool. No, it's exciting. It's exciting to see Latino businesses grow and get to different locations, because I think a lot of the mindset is, let's stay in one location, be really good in this location, but like you talk about, people in Bell get to experience, the culture, the community, and everything, and you're taking that with you. So if you could just give what's your one big advice to future entrepreneurs who are looking to start their own thing and really take the leap? What is that one advice you would give them?
I would say think big. One of the biggest issues we had, even when we started, I was at fault of this. I was simulating and projecting the growth of my business a little bit too conservatively and too small. Think outside the box, think outside your one location, think outside your own neighborhood, because if you don't, you're always going to limit yourself and you're never going to see the possibilities outside. So I think my biggest piece of advice is think bigger, take a little bit more risk than you're comfortable with, because if you're too comfortable with every risk you're taking, your company's not going to grow to its full potential.
Got it.
So I think it's just those two things. Think bigger, take a little bit more risks, and yeah, I mean, it's about that. I think, like you mentioned, the Latino community most of the time just thinks about one place, maximizing that spot. You're the only employee. You can make it work because you're the only one that knows.
Yeah.
Trust people, think bigger, and take a little bit of risks.
Awesome. No, that's great. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Love the beer here, and definitely would recommend it to a lot of people. So thank you so much.
Of course, thank you so much for stopping by.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, guys.